was no mistaking who was calling. The pain crushing the chest, trying to squeeze out all life, trying to stop a heart that had served me faithfully for 49 years. Lying there on the gurney while the paramedics were trying to find a vein that had not collapsed, 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind. I'm not going to get to say goodbye to Annabelle and the children. Why won't the nitro work? My work at Biola is not over. I'm going to see Jesus face to face in just minutes. This is such an ordinary death. So many people die of heart attacks. Why do I have to die like this? It reminded me of the time in the Philippines. I was going up to the northern part of the island of Cebu, and you run out of paved roads in about 10 kilometers. I was bumping along on this potholed road, and all of a sudden a hubcap flew off my van and went out into a coconut grove. And I went out there looking for it, and there was a typhoon in the area, and so the trees were swaying. As I'm looking around for this hubcap, all of a sudden, boom, just about 3 feet away, this coconut comes wailing down. This bright, solid boy that hit me, I would have been gone. I thought to myself, I don't want to die like that. I want to die being martyred, preaching the gospel down in Argyle where there's no gospel witness, and having the Knights of Columbus throwing the rocks at me, not being hit on the head by a coconut. The medical personnel at Dallas were heroic in their efforts to save me. It was almost as if the chief end of man was to live. And yet it is appointed unto man once to die. Life is so fragile and unpredictable. For years I've been wrestling with the thought of the unpredictability of life. Whenever I saw a newspaper clipping that reported an unusual death, I clipped it. And soon my file was bulging, full of items that illustrated how frail and unpredictable life is. Here's some samples from my file. Long Beach, California, a 28-year-old man died after being accidentally shot in the head by a friend who had mistaken a gun for a cigarette lighter, authorities said. Denver. An airline employee was shot to death Wednesday when a handgun discharged inside a duffel bag that fell off a baggage cart at Denver Stapleton International Airport, officials said. Los Angeles. A baby held in its father's arms. If there was ever a place you'd think a baby would be safe, sitting at home in his father's arms. The person in the apartment above was cleaning a rifle. It accidentally discharged, went through the floor and the ceiling right into the baby's head and killed the baby. In case you think that just guns kill, let me mention trees. Dallas. A huge tree limb cracked like a thunderbolt and plunged some 50 feet into a group of spectators at the Byron Nelson Golf Classic Friday, killing one person and injuring at least 3 others. Other things besides trees fall from the sky. San Juan Capistrano, a 5-year-old girl was killed when she was struck by the propeller of a banner-towing plane that crash-landed in San Juan Capistrano Saturday afternoon. If you decide to get off the ground and think it's safer in the air, listen to this. Washington, Air Florida Flight 90 crashed into the Potomac after taking off from National Airport in Washington, D.C. 74 died in the plane and 4 died on the bridge as the plane hit the cars on the bridge. Well, you'll stay out of airplanes. The same day as the Air Florida crash, 3 died in a subway accident in Washington. Well, you'll not get on the train. Miamisburg, Ohio, 2 women and a month-old baby were killed when a Conrail freight train crashed into their house. You'll just go for a walk. Washington Township, New Jersey. 5-year-old Jeremy Vacariza was walking to a seat in the opening act of the circus. 3 performing leopards. But he came too close to the cats, and as a horrified audience watched, one of them slashed his throat. Jeremy died an hour after being admitted to the Hackenstown Community Hospital Thursday night. He was 5 years old, and he went to Bible school. I'm sorry, that's all, said the father. Even walking isn't safe. San Francisco, in an article entitled, "Death Delayed His Hand Till Now," the caption under the picture says, "She beat the odds in Laos, only to die in a 1,000,000-to-1 accident." It goes on to describe this Laotian who was walking along in San Francisco when a piece of a scroll of ornament on a building fell down and hit her on the head. Police said it was a 1 in a million possibility. Well, you'd escape this morbid subject and go to an amusement park. San Jose. A teenage boy was killed Saturday and 8 persons injured in a roller coaster accident at Marriott's Great America in Santa Clara, according to amusement park spokesman. Valencia, California. A 23-year-old man was killed Saturday and his bride of several hours seriously injured after the couple fell nearly 50 feet in an amusement park gondola, authorities said. Well, you play some music to calm your nerves. Orange, California. A high school party in Orange ended in tragedy Saturday when a 19-year-old guitarist apparently was electrocuted by his guitar and microphone. How about the beach? Malibu. 55-year-old man died when strong winds blew a sail-equipped surfboard out to sea in what a Coast Guard spokesman called a freak occurrence. Monterey. 25-year-old Louis A. Bourne of Pacific Grove was surfing at Fan Shell Beach in Monterey, was bitten and killed by what authorities feel was a 25-foot great white shark. You won't even go in the water. La Jolla. This person goes down to the beach. Man in his 20s. He puts his towel down there, and he lies down on the towel, and a lifeguard jeep pulls up and stops. They get out, do some business. They get back in the jeep and run over him and kill him. You'll take a trip. Kansas City. 130 people died at the Hyatt Regency in Kansas City when 2 walkways collapsed in the lobby. This is one of the most modern hotels, only a year old. Paris, France. A 29-year-old tourist was killed in Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris by a lady who jumped from the top of the cathedral, committing suicide. Even going to the hospital is not safe. Boise, Idaho. Rabies vaccinations are underway for 48 persons who came in contact with a Boise woman who died of rabies after cornea transplant. Dr. Fred Dixon, director of Idaho's Central District Health Department, said Constantine Wesselman, 37, died after receiving a cornea from a 30-year-old Baker, Oregon man who doctors say probably died of rabies. He just won't go anywhere. San Carlos, California. A 5-year-old boy is sitting on his bicycle outside a toy store, and a Volkswagen went by, without the hood on the engine. A bolt flew off the generator, hit the young boy in the jugular vein. They said he was dead before he hit the ground. Big Bend, Wisconsin. Mrs. Ashpo was killed Tuesday night when she tripped on a neighbor's yard, fell on a glass she was carrying, and slashed her throat. Palo Alto, a piggyback ride on his father's back turned into tragedy for an East Palo Alto boy late Saturday when he fell and hit his head on a piece of furniture. The 3-year-old boy, Charles Head, was pronounced dead at Stanford University Hospital, according to a spokesman for the Santa Clara Coroner Office. Los Angeles, a 7-year-old girl hanged herself accidentally. She was in the backyard jumping rope, decided to tie the end of the rope to a fuse box. Got up in a bucket to do this. In a freak way, she slipped off the bucket and the rope caught around her neck and hanged her. I know this has been rather morbid, but don't reach for an aspirin. Chicago. 7 people died October 1 and 2 in 82 when they took Tylenol headache capsules laced with cyanide. My point is not to depress you with this rather long list of unusual deaths, but to rather indelibly impress you with the truth that's appointed unto man once to die. Whether you fly or walk or drive or stay in bed, that's where most people die. Death is on its way and cannot be avoided. Listen to the words of Eliphaz in Job. One dies in his full strength, being wholly at ease and satisfied. His sides are filled out with fat, and the marrow of his bones is moist. While another dies with a bitter soul, never even tasting anything good. Together they lie down in the dust, and worms cover them. Whether it's the end of a long, rich, full life, or whether life is just beginning like baby Faye, death is ever present. And so the psalmist says, teach us to number our days so that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. As I have faced death so recently, I've asked myself a number of questions about death that will help me in applying my heart to wisdom. I have 4 questions. What is death? If man and women are made in the image of God, why should they die? Third, what are the consequences of death? And fourth, what is a cure? Now, I only have 6 minutes to cover those 4 questions, so I'm going to skip the first 3. That's one way to end chapel on time. I'll give you a one-word answer on the first 3 instead of developing them. What is death? It's separation. Physical death is a separation of the body from the soul and the spirit. Spiritual death is a separation of the soul and the spirit from God. Why, if we're made in the image of God, do we die? The fall. What are the consequences of death? Separation. Physical death, my body goes to the ground, my soul and spirit go to be with the Lord. Spiritual death, that separation continues until you die. You're separated from God for all eternity. The last one that I would like to develop in the 5 minutes that I have left now. What is the cure? As far as physical death, there is no cure until Christ comes back and establishes a new order. Unless he returns, every single one listening to me here in this room today will die. Now, I know at your age it's difficult to think of death. I remember when I was, in college, I didn't think of death. But many of the examples I gave you were your age or under. Physical death will come. However, there is a cure for spiritual death right now. Hebrews 2:14 says, "Since then the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise also partook of the same, that through death he might render powerless him who had the power of death, that is the devil, and might deliver those who through fear of death were subject to slavery all their lives." Jesus Christ came to taste death for every person. His sacrifice on the cross extended eternal life with him to all. Whereas sin entered the world through one man, spiritual life comes through Jesus Christ. Paul puts it so well when he talks about the consequences of Christ's death. Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. I remember hearing the story of a well-known preacher who had to bury his wife. Coming back from the graveside, he had his little daughter sitting in the car with him, and he was trying to explain what had happened to Mommy. And he was having a difficult time trying to get her to grasp what had really happened. And they pulled up to a stoplight, and as they were there in the stoplight, all of a sudden a truck came alongside of them. And as the truck came alongside, it cast this big shadow over that car and enveloped it with a shadow. And all of a sudden it came to him, and he turned to his little girl and he said, "Tell me, would you rather be hit by the truck or by its shadow?" And she said, "Of course, the shadow." He said, "That's exactly what's happened to Mommy. She's been hit by the shadow of death. Jesus Christ has taken the sting of death away. The Lord, her shepherd, has taken her through the valley of the shadow of death." One night, 2 years ago, I received a telephone call from a dear friend of mine. We're classmates here at Biola. And his wife had just died 2 hours before. And we were crying together on the phone and praying. And he told me what had happened that night. She was hospitalized. She had cancer. He knew that she was going to die sometime, but certainly not that night, because she felt so much better and stronger. And 2 of her friends came to see her that night. She was a principal. And 2 of the teachers in the school district came to call on her, and they had a marvelous time of fellowship and talking together. Then they left, and he and his wife were there in the hospital room alone. And he said to her, "Joyce, would you like to have your back rubbed?" She just loved to have her back rubbed. And so she kind of leaned forward in the bed, and he was rubbing her shoulders and her neck, and they were having a good time talking there. And then all of a sudden, Joyce said to Ron, "Ron, it's time," and died. And Ron was saying, it was just as if somebody came into that room that I couldn't see, but she could see, and said, Joyce, it's time. Let's go. And she just passed that information on to her husband. A month or so after the funeral service, I called Ron up and said, why don't you come on over and let's have lunch together. That's a tough time. Right after the death, there are lots of people around and the sympathy is poured out, but so quickly we just go back to our ordinary activities, and he's left alone there with his memories and the hurt, and every time he looked around the house would see another thing that reminded him of Joyce. So I asked him to come on over, and we went to lunch down there at the Sichuan place right down by the corner. And he was telling me about how much he missed Joyce. And he said, last night I had this really funny dream. I was talking to God, and I was just pleading with him to bring Joyce back. I said, I just can't stand it. I'm just so lonely. I need her. Why did you take her? Won't you please bring her back? And the Lord said to him, all right, Ron, I'll bring her back on one condition. Anything, Lord, you just name it. I'll do it. I don't care what it is. You name it, I'll do it. Oh, thank you. The Lord said to him, I'll ask Joyce if she wants to come back. And he said, big deal, Lord. Thanks for nothing. Thanks for nothing. And there we were, two grown men, laughing. It was funny. Boy, the Lord had a sense of humor here. And crying and sogging up our chicken kung pao. And I tell you, to die, Paul says, is gain. To be with Christ is far better. I've shared with you how fragile and unpredictable life is. Everyone we come in contact with is just a heartbeat away from eternity. The consequences for those outside of Christ are severe. We have the answer. We can point to the cure, a cure that goes beyond the fragile beating of a heart or the ravages of cancer or 1,000 bizarre ways in which we can die. This is why Phil Braun went to Africa. He wrote just before his death, I love it here in Zaire. Life here is sometimes rather hazardous, and I'm completely dependent upon God. I want to be used to bring glory to God. I want that desperately. Here's what some have said about Phil. From Phil's spoken testimony, from the messages of the songs he so loved to sing, and from his very life, it was obvious that his life had been completely offered to his Lord long ago. His father wrote, we who love Phil remember his positive attitudes, his high expectation in Christ for his ministries, and his smooth adjustment to Kinshasa life. He came into the work of the sinner on a dead run and never slowed down. If we could have written an order for the ideal co-worker here, it would have come out of Phil. And his mother said, we are proud of the beautiful son we have lost, and completely at peace with the God to whom we surrendered him irrevocably many years ago. Phil, our beloved Phil, is safe in the arms of Jesus. May God raise up 1,000 Phils to take his place. May God give us a sense of urgency and gracefulness as we share the cure. Death is a reality, but so is heaven. In this Thanksgiving season, every morning I wake up, I thank God for another day. I thank him for his mercy, his great faithfulness to me. It's new and fresh. We're to love life. We're to serve him. We're to glorify him, whether it's by life or by death. Death is a reality, but so is heaven. And as we close our time together, I've asked Cindy Fix to sing about the reality of heaven. And after she's sung, we can be dismissed quietly.